Hi, friends. Welcome. Welcome to the session. I'm glad you're here. Happy holidays. If you're not here or if you're watching the recording, I'm guessing that in many cases it's because you're helping a last minute student, but that's the focus of today. Just to go over the bullet points of what I'm covering, I'm going to talk to you about how do you start the conversation with a student who is in some cases maybe really attached to an idea that they really like. How do you begin that? It's really a strategy for starting that conversation. I'm going to talk a little bit about weaving in extracurricular activities to a personal statement because I think if a student is really attached to their topic, but maybe it isn't revealing as much about them as it could be. The question is, how could it reveal more sides of them? So I've got some really specific tactical stuff on that. I've also got stuff for when a student comes in and they've got some great ideas, but it's too long. How do we help the student trim words? I've got a strategy for that. And then I'm going to jump in and do a little over the shoulder look at, reviewing an actual student essay. Now, I would love to know if there's anybody who's watching the session live now, if you have an essay that is like too long from a student and you would welcome me giving some feedback on it, just send it to me via direct message. You can send it in the chat via the via the direct send function, or if you can't send it that way, you can send it to Jasmine. Jasmine, if you wouldn't mind putting it in the chat, putting the email address that folks could send it to, and then Jasmine, you can just direct message it to me because I'd love to actually work on one of your students' essays. And then I want to share just a little bit about, I've got a 3-hour course that's coming up next week that I'm really excited about. That's on this very topic. And one of the challenges that I had in putting the content today is I wanted to make sure that I was giving you like really good, valuable, awesome stuff and not giving away everything from the course because I tend to want to give everything away on every session. This is a fundraiser. This is our end of the year fundraiser for our Match Letters program. So if you find this valuable and you want to contribute to the Match Letters program, I'd love for some of y'all to join for next week. And if you wouldn't mind, Jasmine, sharing the link to to next week's course at the start here, that would be super awesome. And I'll talk about it more later. But let's jump into the thing itself. Let's jump into this technique for helping students become less attached to their idea. And if you have specific questions or, like challenges that come up when you're working with students, throw it into the chat because we'll make sure that I'll make sure that we cover it, during this session. Thank you. A great one from Jane. Okay. Yeah, actually, let me just read this one aloud from Jane. How do you negotiate the situation when a personal statement needs work, but it's already been submitted to early decision, maybe their first choice, before the student started working with you without leaving them feeling disheartened? Okay. So I think that I want to like use that as a segue, thanks, Jane, into this first technique. So let's say that this is the situation where the student has come to you, they've submitted their essay for SMU, they're really hoping, but they're like, I want to make sure. And they're like, what do you think of my essay? So this happened to me a week and a half ago, that a student had submitted his essay that he'd worked on at the last minute, and it was on a robotics competition. And did he write about Legos? Yes, he did. And is he also an engineer? Yes, he was. And so it was sort of a perfect, you know, cocktail of, things that would give us pause as counselors to be like, okay, what are some questions that we're asking? So the questions that were going through my head were things like, how much is the essay going to matter for this student? And it depends on the school and it depends on the student's grades. So I think there's a proper zoom back moment that needs to happen there. So with this student, I asked him, what are your grades? How's your transcript looking? And this student had a 3.2. And I was like, okay. And I said, are you submitting test scores? And he said, no, I got scores, but I wasn't really excited about them. And I said, okay, where are you applying? Where are you hoping to apply? And he mentioned Harvey Mudd. And with all the love in my heart, I said, if you have a 3.2, and you're applying for engineering, I said, how are your math grades? He said, B's. And I was like, honestly, the personal statement isn't going to matter all that much. If you're applying to Harvey Mudd with a 3.2 and you're applying for something that's math related, the maths are B's. And I said, there are so many students, and I said this, again, with love in my heart, there's so many students who are applying with perfect, grades in advanced level math, and they've got 1,570 on their SAT, or, as often happens, they've got a 1,550 and they're like, or as a student said to me recently, I've got a 1,530, should I submit it? And it's like, gosh, it's wild that we've come to this point in our, that college admissions become so competitive. But should you submit a 1530 is a question that students now ask. Whereas back in my day, 20 years ago, it's like, of course you crushed it. They're like, well, many students are submitting 1600s, et cetera. So anyway, side note, I said to that 1530 student, yes, that's a great score. Go ahead and submit it. But with this student, I was like, I had to have a really frank conversation with them, and it sort of shifted. And yes, there was a little heartbreak moment I sensed, but it was sort of like, and look, I'm happy to help you with this, but for these highly selective schools, the essay isn't going to matter too much. Now, there were some other schools that he's applying to, schools like Pittsburgh and Rutgers. And I'm like, for those schools, I think it could matter more. So the next question I asked was, how much time do you have? How much time are you willing to spend? And that sort of could make a student kind of step back and be like, well, what do you mean? But I really need to know that, because if the student's like, I don't have a lot of time and I've got all these other supplemental essays to write, then probably I'm going to, shift my attention to like the supplemental essays and just be like, look, the personal statement draft is done, but let's focus on the supplements next. Make sure that you got drafts of those. And if there's time, we can go back and talk about the personal statement. So I realize I'm giving an indirect answer to the question, Jane, but it's sort of like, let's zoom back, see what, what are the schools the students applying? What is the work that's left to be done? And then how much time have you got? And then we're kind of working based on that budget. Let's say they are applying to schools where the essays, the personal statement might matter. And they go, you know what, I've got some time, as this student did. He said, I've got a little time. Then I asked him this question, and this is the sort of the core piece that I think can help the student, sort of orient. And the question that I would suggest asking is, what do you feel like the personal statement is revealing about the author? And I think this is a really important question. I'm phrasing it in a really particular way. Notice that I'm not saying, what do you think this essay reveals about you? Because already that sounds kind of aggressive and sort of like I have a judgment that it's not revealing much. But I'm asking about it in a sort of objective way. So not what does it reveal about you? I'm saying the author. And then I'm also saying, what do you believe this personal statement? So I'm separating it from who the student is to a thing that they've done. And what is it about the author? So I'm using this objective language so they can think about themselves in the third person. So again, let me rephrase that. Let me phrase that again. Repeat that. What do you believe this personal statement is currently revealing about the author? You notice I added the word currently in there. You could do that because there's an implication there that like eventually it might reveal some different things. Now, there is kind of an implied, it's kind of a leading question. And you can decide if you want to be like upfront about, hey, I think that this could maybe reveal more about you, or just ask this plainly and see how the student responds. Because I think that after that question is asked, I think it's important to pause and give the student a chance to reply. Then they'll say something, they'll say, well, and they'll kind of point through some different things. And then sometimes I'll engage the student in the conversation. I'll be like, okay, you're saying it's revealing leadership. Let's take a look at where. Okay, cool. And then I'll maybe like highlight and notice some things. And I'll often say to them, I'll agree. Yeah, I think it is revealing this, this, and this. And then I ask a second question oftentimes. And it's, what do you feel like is being revealed in the personal statement that isn't obvious from elsewhere in the application? And yes, this is also a leading question. But what this can start to do is unhook the student from certain, let's say that they're just like, I've spent a lot of time on this. When they start to look objectively at, is this personal statement revealing sides of me that aren't obvious from elsewhere in my, other pieces of my application, then maybe they start to go, okay, maybe there's some changes that could be made here. And we're not even at the phase of like, maybe a lot of it needs to change or maybe a new topic is needed, but maybe there's something that I could be open to shifting just through these one, but really two questions. So I want to offer that first here. What are the things that could, what do you feel like the essay is revealing? And what do you feel like it's revealing that aren't already in the application? And then it begins a dialogue. And a thing that I'll sometimes do with students is we'll go through, I'm not going to go through this whole thing right now, but we'll go through what are the pros, what are the cons, and what are the questions that the student has about the essay. And that starts to begin the dialogue. And then it becomes a collaborative thing. Now, eventually, I think that you can start to open up a conversation if you feel like it's appropriate, asking the student, would you be open to considering other topics if you feel like that's apropos. But I think these two questions can be really helpful for starting things off. Um, I'm looking at some of the questions. What is the statement of purpose and variety? I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, Kuya. If you can maybe ask that in a slightly different way, just so that I get it. What are tips for maintaining our own equilibrium during busy last-minute days? Well, here's one thing I'll say. This is like kind of life advice, side note, but I think that we overestimate what we can get done in a day. Side note, and we underestimate what we can get done in a year. That's sort of like life planning advice. But I think that I would say if you can sort of go take your whatever you hope to get done in a particular day, that list of 5 different action items, and whittle it down to like, what are the 2 things that I definitely want to get done today? And then make the second part like, if time, I'll get to these things. I think for me, that's been a really helpful way of feeling accomplished at the end of the day. And also just clarifying what are the things that I definitely need to focus on. This is also kind of life advice, but I think especially for college applications, it can be really helpful. Okay. I want to shift to the second part, which is like this is a very practical one, but how to weave in extracurricular activities into a personal statement. So let me just head to that real quick. Okay. I'm opening up a separate document because I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. So first, why should students even be thinking about this? I think that oftentimes students weave in extracurricular activities either, let's just go to the ends of the spectrum, either not at all or way too much. And I think that there's students who, and there's 2 different problems. If students aren't bringing in extracurriculars at all to their personal statement, sometimes it can feel like, well, how does that weave into your journey? How do those connect to your journey? And then there's the opposite problem of like students who are like making it too obvious and they're just naming extracurriculars. So for the sake of this, because it's kind of like a sampler, I'm going to focus on the latter type of why I think it's problematic if students are just basically doing a resume rehash essay. And the way this might sound is simply like, similarly, when I led my team to victory at regionals last year in robotics or in debate or in tennis, or, this conversation reminded me of the time when I started my nonprofit and raised $25,000 to support efforts and blah, blah, blah. So there's sort of, why is this bad? There's sort of this sense that, one, it can be confusing to the reader when a student mentions an extracurricular. And the reader kind of goes, wait a minute, I thought we were talking about your commitment to social justice. And now suddenly it sounds like you're just giving me a big, like, resume drop. And then I think in other situations, it can sometimes feel a little distasteful, where we kind of are like sitting there having a casual conversation and the student's getting personal. And then suddenly this overt mention of an achievement feels like, wait, what? I thought we were just kind of hanging out. And it's kind of hard culturally to like describe that one, especially if students are expected or have the cultural expectations of like, but wait, on the UCAS, the UK applications, we're supposed to be talking about our accomplishments. That's the whole thing. And the things that we've read and how we prepared for our major. But there's something about the US, process where it's sort of, you kind of have to be a little bit, more subtle as you weave in these things. So what are some different ways to do this? Let me share my screen now. So the first technique is to potentially hint at the extracurricular activity rather than naming it explicitly, and then trust the reader to make the connection. So here's an essay that I love. If you're a counselor and you've been on a previous session, you might have seen this one. This is the food essay. Here's how it begins. Since 1941, my family has had an odd tradition. 3 days a week, my great-grandfather Pop brought home ribs. After dinner, he'd go around the table inspecting each plate, making sure each rib was stripped down to the bone. If he found one morsel, you couldn't be excused. Pop believed that before you could leave the table, you had to finish your ribs. This lesson has stuck with me. Whether I'm staying up until 2 in the morning to figure out the radius and convergence of a power series, or identifying solutions to countless concerns issued by my school district, I strive to finish my ribs. But this is just one of the many lessons food has taught me. Okay, notice these 2 phrases, radius of convergence of a power series and countless concerns issued by my school district. So these are 2 things that are showing qualities that colleges like to see. In this case, intellectual curiosity. And in this case, concerns issued by my school district is hinting at service. And these are things like this is things that, this is obviously hinting at his calculus work. This is hinting at something in his activities list, but he's not, beating the reader over the head with, then I was, captain of this or leader of this. And how does he do it? He's focusing on the value first. So the value here is finishing his ribs, finishing what you start, perseverance, making good, whatever you want to call that value. And then he gives these different things as examples of how he does that. And I think that's really important. I think what starts to make it feel a little bit like off-putting or like name droppy or braggy is if the student names the achievement first and then mentions why, or doesn't mention at all what the value is. Okay. So if I had to like distill this, whatever thing you want to weave it in as an example of a value that you focused on earlier. Give the reader something nice to like focus on, the value. And then the reader wonders, well, how do I know you've got this value? Well, let me give you an example. And then those examples are the things that you're wanting to weave in and mention. Okay. And like I said, you don't even have to name it explicitly. Like the countless concerns issued by my school district, the student could have named specific activities, but I kind of know what those are if I go to the activities list. So that's why I think it's okay to just, make it a little more subtle. Let me give you another one of these. And again, I'm still focusing here on students who are like too braggy, maybe applying to highly selectives. Weaving in a more personal, non-extracurricular example in between the extracurricular activity mentions. Okay, so here, take a look at this example. But this is just one of the many lessons food has taught me. During Thanksgiving, instead of going around the table to express thanks, my family writes notes on the tablecloth, the same one for the past 26 years. You'll find thoughts from my dad, but only until 2004, or corny jokes from my stepdad, but only until 2016. And you'll read, family is everything from my great-grandmother Non, but only until 2017. My family is far from perfect, but it's in the presence of a tablecloth where time freezes and I begin to feel an unfamiliar sense of stability. It's where my brother Noah told my dad he loved him after 6 years of not communicating, where mom sat next to dad without a lawyer by their side, and where my family has gathered for every birthday at the same restaurant since I was 4. Okay, so notice, just and this is, by the way, this is continuing the same. This was the first part of it, but this is just one of the many lessons food has taught me. So we're continuing. And he mentions the theme, the thread here. So we know, okay, we're still on message here. And then this stuff in here. So notice that he's just come off of a mention up here of like some extracurriculars and some cool academic stuff. And then he shifts into something that is decidedly personal. Information that wouldn't be obvious from elsewhere in his application. This is not going to be in his activities list. It's not going to be in his recommendation letters. It's not going to, maybe it's in a supplemental essay, but it's truly personal. But this is what's important. He's still weaving in values. Family, ritual, vulnerability, stability. I get a sense of what's important to the student, but he's still connecting it back to food. Now, later in the essay, he's going to go back to mentioning some extracurriculars, but the fact that I've been given a kind of a break here is a really simple strategy that students can use to give a little bit of air so that it's not like every single paragraph has an extracurricular activity mention. Now, have I read essays that successfully woven an extracurricular activity in every single paragraph? Maybe, but I think oftentimes I come away, let me just stop sharing my screen for just a second. I come away with the feeling that like, it feels like the student is talking a lot about extracurriculars. And this could be like, let's say 4 paragraphs in a row or 5 paragraphs in a row. And if I have that sense, I'll ask them, what I'll do is I'll do a scan and I'll go, is it that one of these is already being talked about in a supplemental essay or is being covered in depth in the activities list and additional info? Because then I might just say to them, hey, could you just break this up with something that's like totally not on your activities list to kind of essentially, I like to say like throw them off the scent because the reader is really attuned to this, is really aware of students like trying to weave in these, these different sides of themselves. Let's see, what else do I want to say? Oh, so in terms of personal details, these don't have to be necessarily challenges. It could just be something that's clearly connected to something that you love. It could be something really, really geeky, really nerdy that the student loves. So these don't have to be like some deep, dark secret and the student's trying to like dredge up what's the most difficult thing I've been through. So pausing for a second to see if there are any questions related to that. There are more techniques, but I'm again trying to sort of give sort of sampler platter here. What is what I'm curious what comes up for y'all as you hear that. Anything in the feel free to put it in the Q&A. And then I'm gonna talk about cutting words here in just a minute. All right, nothing coming through. Okay, cool. So let's talk about trimming words. How do we help a student trim words? Let me share here. I'm going to share a sample essay that recently um, came through. And of course, oh, here came one from Andrea. I always thought you want to have about 3 to 4 character traits come up in an essay for the reader to see. Yeah, I think that's a nice idea. I mean, I think that in some cases, there might be 3 to 4 major character traits. So let's say that the student's writing and they end up having, 7 paragraphs. Or let's just go simple, like 5 paragraphs. Yeah, there might be an intro, a conclusion, and then there are 3 different traits that they're showing, and there's like each paragraph is showing a different trait. It could be 6 paragraphs. I think that's a solid way of doing that. I think that there will sometimes be sort of sub themes or sub traits that they're also showing along the way. But I think sort of in terms of theming the paragraphs, I think that's a great way to go. Yeah, Carrie's making a good point. Kids are very hesitant to cut out an activity, feeling that an admission officer will miss it, even if it's in their activities lesson, in the activity section. Yeah, I hear you. And different different strokes for different folks. I think if the student is really insecure about that and they're worried about it, just say, great. I think that the trade-off here is just the reader might feel like it's, mentioning something that's already clear from elsewhere. But it can be a matter of degree, and it's sort of like the how they mention it. So if the student is like clearly mentioning their leaderliness, in the start of it, then there is a way to, as I was just sharing with the values, to sort of segue them into the thing, or to basically, just not be as explicit. And there was another student that I was giving notes to about a month ago, right before early deadlines, that it seemed like it was just really heavy-handed mentions, and I just wanted to reassure the student, hey, this stuff's in there. I think it's fine to reference the stuff, but you don't need to like reference your role. Oftentimes it comes to like the actual role, um, that they're focused on. Okay, let me share with you a simple, let's see, a simple strategy for helping a student cut words. So check this out. I recently did a little boot camp, and here was one of the essays. And the draft isn't too long. Um, it's actually, 763 is like, it's not sort of like these 1,200 word drafts, or I think I saw one recently that was like, would you take a look at this? And it was 2,200 words. And I was like, oh, for the purpose, this is like from the same boot camp. And I was like, that seems like a lot to try to look at. But here's the simple strategy for this. And what it is, it's called doing a word budget. And I'm going to call this word, I'll just put this at the top, word budget. And the simple technique is step 1, decide the purpose of the paragraph. And then 2, decide how much, time, essentially, how many words to devote to each section, to each paragraph, basically. And this is sort of a zoom back. So and I love doing this, by the way, in between drafts, like even after the student's written like a second draft, I think it's good to do this. Usually after the first draft, we kind of need to go back and figure out what is the purpose of the essay, and then probably re-outline, and then probably start from scratch. But once they sort of like know what's going in each paragraph, we have some sense of it, we can like really hone in on what the thing is. So let's take a look at this. And I'm going to read each paragraph aloud, and just kind of go piece by piece. And I kind of want you in your mind to think, okay, what is if we had to title this paragraph, what might it be? And I'll do this with students just like this. Constant upheaval taught me to adapt quickly to new environments. Growing up in a single-parent home presented many challenges. My mom struggled with her mental health after my father's death. And I'm already going to highlight these words. As an only child with no extended family, I often became her primary source of emotional and social support. I had to be independent from an early age, managing meals, chores, and my schedule while my mom worked long hours. Despite her efforts, we often struggled with finances and had to rely on state aid for housing and food. We moved frequently as my mom searched for stable job opportunities and living situations. Not having a permanent home forced me to develop self-reliance and flexibility. I learned to pack light, make the most of what little I had, and focus on what was within my control. These experiences shaped my resilience and strengthened my ability to face adversity head on. Okay, this has got a mini arc to it that it's really powerful. I think, the opening here is like challenges, effects, what I did, and what I learned. Like this is a whole arc. This is a whole essay in itself right here in just, what is this, like 200, 150, 149. Yeah. So there's a lot going well here, but I think that this is challenge effects what I learned before 2020. So this is like, if I were to just title this, I think that this is, if I were to shorten it, I'd be like, this is challenges pre-2020, and the student would have been 12 years old. So like I would call this like, AKA early life challenges. But again, I think it's much more than that. That seems to be the main purpose of this paragraph, to establish early life challenges. Okay, next paragraph. In 2020, we moved to West Virginia. So what's the, again, new game. What's the main purpose of this paragraph? Schools were closed to in-person learning, so my mom enrolled me in a hybrid homeschooling program. This unique structure allowed me to study independently. Cool. I'm just going to highlight this. That seems important. Study independently at home while attending small seminar-style classes 2 to 3 days a week. I thrived in this environment, transforming from a quiet, reserved kid into a confident, engaged student. Ooh, I'm going to highlight this word. The supportive atmosphere encouraged me to step out of my comfort zone. I eagerly participated in discussions, took on leadership roles, and explored new subjects with curiosity and enthusiasm. My passion for learning extended far beyond the classroom. I joined extracurricular activities, volunteered in my community, and embraced opportunities to challenge myself, all while building meaningful connections with peers and teachers. Most importantly, my flexible schedule allowed me to pursue non-academic interests and grow academically and personally. Okay, so rather than me do it this time, I'd love for you to tell me, what do you think, if you had to name, you can do it in the Q&A box because our chat isn't on, what would you say is the purpose of this second paragraph? So if paragraph 1 is about early life challenges, what is paragraph 2 about? What would you say? Let me know in the chat or in the Q&A. Then we're saying transformation. Anne is noting students now outgoing and bold. Realization of most supportive environments. Neat. Show curiosity and growth. Yeah, it seems like curiosity and growth are sort of the central themes here. Yeah. Yeah, I'm digging this. And obviously I'm biased by these words that I've highlighted, but it seems like these are the transformations that came as a result of this that led the student to become, let me see, eagerly participated, leadership, exploring new subjects with curiosity, enthusiasm. Yeah, I don't know if growth is mentioned here. So it's something like, I'm going to try to thread the needle here, but it's something like how homeschooling led to, you know, uh, transformation and growth. Yeah. Did I get I think I got sort of everybody's there. Um, okay, let's look at the next one. One of my greatest passions has always been horses, a love I inherited from my dad. He grew up caring for and riding horses on his grandfather's farm. When I was young, my mom would share stories of his experiences, and we'd look through photos of him with his family's horses in Croatia. These moments fostered a special connection to that part of my heritage. That's why I was thrilled when I was hired as a stable hand at 14. 9 months later, I was promoted to groom and met Bo. He was a magnificent horse who'd come to our facility for rehabilitation after an injury. Bo and I quickly developed a strong bond, and as my horsemanship skills improved, so did my confidence. Okay, what would you title this paragraph? What's the main purpose here? And I'm not going to highlight any words here. You can see I did the first one, I highlighted words in the second one, and now I'm letting you just, what do you think? Give me some thoughts in the Q&A here. We've got early life challenges, and then we've got how homeschooling led to transformation and growth. What's this paragraph about? Another way that I sometimes think of this is if you had to imagine that this is like, remember those DVD screens that had like, that would name the scene? If you had to name this scene in the movie, what would you call that? That's another kind of fun way to do this. You know, So it's something like, establishing early life challenges. I'm gonna do it this way. And this one is homeschooling leads to transformation and growth. Paragraph 3, there's something about family connection and heritage or introducing a passion. I kind of want to mention horses in this one. Can we do it mentioning horses or Bo? Bo seems to be like we're meeting Bo here. Or there's something here and then meeting Bo. So it's like, it seems like horses are important. Yeah, Kara's saying passion for horses, introduction to Bo. Okay, let's go with that. I kind of like that one because I think that's also kind of getting at some of you mentioned extracurricular activity, some of you mentioned passion. So this is kind of like intro to passion for horses, plus, you know, meet Bo or something like that, you know. Yeah. So let's see. The student is saying how an unexpected relationship impacted growth. I like that. And then concludes with confidence. We already heard that she developed confidence. Yeah, Anne's noting there's maybe a little bit of repetition in here. So is there an opportunity to trim in here maybe? Let's just make that known and we'll come back in a little bit. Okay. Bo taught me many valuable lessons. The most significant was the importance of setting healthy boundaries. During his training, there were moments when he would test my limits and I had to learn how to assert myself without being aggressive. I used to think strength meant being tough, but Bo showed me that true strength comes from knowing and respecting your limits and those of others. This lesson has shaped how I approach relationships, teaching me to stand up for myself in a firm but respectful way. Cool. All right, this one might be a little bit easier. Paragraph 4, what's the main purpose here? What would you say? Let me know in the Q&A. Yeah, I like that, Nora. Lessons learned from the animal kingdom that apply to life. Yeah. What else? I mean, it's sort of right here, right? So if we look at the structure of this one, yeah, this is it, right, Andrea? So there's like Bo taught me valuable lessons. Here's how I applied it in life, and insights I had. So it's something like Bo teaches, teaching me life lessons, like healthy boundaries. Maturity developed by working with Bo. And then as a result, the maturity develops. Yeah, great. I like that, Maureen. Boundaries are good. Yeah, Anne's leaving that in. Okay, cool. I think we're all on the same page here. The point of this is actually there's not a right answer with the student. It's just sort of like, are we syncing up on what we think that, first of all, we know that this is a well-written essay because we're pretty well able to do this. Now, it's not always going to be easy with students. Sometimes it's going to be like, oh, I don't know, I think the paragraph's about this or the paragraph's about this. And there'll be some disagreement. And it's like, oh, okay. That probably gives us a collective sense, meaning, me and the student, that this probably needs to be like refined or defined. Okay. Yeah, Anne's noting, I'm a little confused about how Bo taught those things, but that's for later maybe. So, how did the student learn? Well, here's what I see. There were moments when Bo would test the limits and I had to learn to assert myself without being aggressive. So it seems like that's how the horse taught him healthy boundaries by asserting. Maybe you have questions about what do you mean by test your limits? But anyway. Okay, let's do paragraph 5. We'll stay big picture. My training with Bo has improved my problem-solving abilities. Horses, so Bo teaching me life lessons. I'm going to actually specify this, Bo teaching me healthy boundaries, because it seems like this new paragraph is, Bo teaching me life lessons, number 1, healthy boundaries. You can see where I'm going with this. My training with Bo has improved my problem-solving abilities. Horses can be unpredictable and sensitive to their environment. Navigating the complexities of working with them has taught me the importance of adaptability. Whether calming a nervous horse or adjusting my training approach, I've learned to find creative solutions to unexpected challenges. My experiences have fostered a sense of resilience and determination that I carry into life. This repeats a little bit, and I'm just noting that here. Let's see, whoops, trim repeats. Okay. So what is this one? Let's do this one now. Paragraph 5. What's the main point of this paragraph? Maybe the student is making it too easy on us here with these solid topic sentences. We won't always get great topic sentences like this. I mean, there's a few things in here, right? There's like, Sorry, I'll stop. What do y'all think? Andrea's pointing out this is more telling than showing. Taught me resilience and determination. How? Can you give me some specific examples? Yeah. We're trying to trim, Andrea, not give him more to write. I'm kind of joking. I'm with you. I'm with you. How is it carried into your life? Yeah. Life lessons number two. Okay, cool. Problem solving, adaptability, creative solutions. Yeah, I'm seeing that. So life lessons. Yeah, we've got problem solving. We've got, let's see, let me just highlight some of the things that you're saying. Adaptability and creative solutions. Yeah, that seems true. Um, like how to calm a nervous horse. I see what you're doing there. And that's funny. Um, Whoops, sorry. Okay. Life lesson, I'm going to call this Bo teaching me life lessons number two. Well, really, numbers two, three, and four. Numbers, two, three, four, and it's these things. And by the way, I'm holding down command so that it does this, and I'm copying, and then I just go like that, and whoops, it didn't work like I thought it was going to. Um, but some people are like, how do you keep it like that? It's the command button. Okay. And then we see these things. Now we could argue about is it doing well in terms of the execution of it, but hey, let's say big picture just so we can get through the exercise. Okay. And let's go a little faster through these last two. So paragraph 6, you kind of get what we're doing here. Motivated to share what I learned with my peers, I set up a free camp for youth. Cool. Whoops, not cool, deleting it. Low-income families with the generous support of the horse community offer the participants a chance to connect with horses, learn to care for them. The bonds they form with the horses created a safe space for them to explore their emotions and build trust. Student feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, but with most reporting increased confidence, improved communication skills, and a stronger sense of self-worth. Seeing the impact of these camps has been incredibly rewarding and has reinforced my commitment to expanding the program. Cool. So I'm going to just, I think it's the free camp, free camp for youth. Whoops. To share, experiences I've gained, something like that, to share the positive, but not the positive experience, positive benefits I've gained. Great. Last one. The challenges in my life have made me stronger. Overcoming my struggles, and I'll ask you for this last one. You can maybe beat me to it in the Q&A. What's paragraph 7's main objective here? The challenges of my life have made me stronger. Overcoming my struggles and helping others taught me invaluable lessons about empathy, perseverance, and community connection. My hardships have shaped my character and fueled my passion for supporting others. I'm committed to using what I've learned to positively impact others and inspire them to find strength in themselves. By sharing my experiences, I hope to empower others to overcome their obstacles and see that even in the face of adversity, they have the potential to thrive. So how would you give me a phrase for this one? Summary and insights. Yeah. Conclusion. What her experiences have taught her. Yeah. Something like that. I'll just grab that one because it's longer. And I think yeah. So this is the conclusion. Here's what I've learned, So now what this allows us to do with the student is to go, okay, let's just make sure that these are the pieces that we want and that they're all flowing together. So I'm going to kind of tell the student back the story. So if I was reading, like, if someone were to ask me, what is this essay about? I would say paragraph by paragraph. Well, in the first paragraph, the student establishes some of their early life challenges. They talk about what they did about it and what they learned. Then they talk about this experience of homeschooling and how that led to some transformation and growth. Then they introduce their passion for horses, and in one horse in particular named Bo. Bo taught them some life lessons around healthy boundaries. And in the next paragraph, they talk about how Bo taught them some other things about problem solving, adaptability, and creative solutions. As a result, the student then went and created a free camp for youth to basically teach them, help others, experience these positive benefits. In the end, their challenges have made them stronger. They've learned some wonderful things that they're going to carry with them to college. Now, the fact that I'm able to do that, and by the way, you know this, but I'm just going to say it, not every essay is going to be this well structured, but the fact that I'm able to do that, great. And that's kind of where we're hoping to get. But here's what I'll say is that even if it's not well structured, you can kind of go back just based on this exercise and help the student make edits if we like. That's kind of back on helping them edit and decide, where it can be trimmed. Now, my question for you all, let me know in the Q&A, Where do you feel like the student could potentially make some trims? This is 763 words, so we need to get 110 words out of this. Where do you, and I expect that we don't all agree, and there's not a right answer here, but where do you see opportunities for the student to trim? Okay, Nora's suggesting a big cut. I want to hear other opinions. I like this. This is what the beauty of this process is we're all going to have different approaches here. Okay. I'm going to read some of the opinions so far. Nora's saying, cut all of this stuff. Start with Bo. Um, Kara and Ann are saying you could trim here. Okay. Maybe we get 50 words out of that. Someone else is saying, let's cut the homeschooling section and reduce this. So a lot of votes to trim this section. Maybe that's because that's where I'm highlighting. I don't know. Here's some cool lessons learned. Okay, Sammy's agreeing here, man. I don't know, maybe that's, I don't know, whatever you call it, first person who spoke up bias, but Sammy's saying, yeah, trim here. Okay. Andrea's saying, begin with how he feels disconnected from friends because of constant moving and then concentrate on the bow. We're liking starting with bow. Okay. Um, and then, oh, this is interesting. Kara's suggesting taking sections of this and this and weaving it into how Bo helped her. Okay. Okay. So there's pretty much agreement that these first two need to be trimmed. Um, I'm going to note that I think some of this stuff about the free camp for youth could probably be trimmed because I think some of it could be mentioned in the extracurriculars. But I'm not talking about like two-thirds of it, which is 110 words. I think there's probably a third of this could get cut, and it could be expanded upon some of the specifics in the additional information section. So just another one. And saying, I may be way off, but I feel like the ending on the goal of sharing life lessons with horse camps misses the mark of why I'm a good candidate to go to college. Interesting point. And that's more of a content thing, right? So maybe, and it could be that this is like the student does want 87 words here, but these aren't the right 87 words. Or that maybe this is not the right thing to focus on here. So in terms of potential trims, here are two things that you can do. One is what you've just done is you go, here are the main paragraphs that we think need cutting. Okay, well, let's do this. Let's figure out if we were to keep everything just as it is for now, let me just see how long this is. 478 words. So quick math tells us we got 22, 72, 172. All right, can we trim this, which is currently 285 to 172? Well, let's say that this, is, I don't know how long it is, but let's say this goes to 100 words, and then this goes to 75 words. Then what is this currently? 1/5. So we get 50 words out of this one, and then 50 words out of this one. That's a very quick word budget, and that's just assuming that the rest of it stays the same. Okay. So I know that seems like a very simple thing to do, but with students who've written like 2,200 word epic things, we create a simple outline and then just give them the word budget, just like this. Okay. Questions that come up as I say that to you. I'm curious if there's anything that you're thinking about. Now, side note, as you're maybe thinking about questions, I think that in terms of weaving in extracurricular activities, this is a cool thing. The Free Camp for Youth is really great. I imagine that there are other ways that this student has developed these skills, problem-solving abilities, adaptability, creative solutions. And just right now, as I read this, I'd love to see some more examples. So someone mentioned that, I think, as well. I think it was Kara. Like, I'd love to see some more examples of how the student has manifested these things. And for me, this is sort of at the opposite end of the spectrum, where it's not the student is woven in too many extracurriculars. It's the student has not maybe woven in enough. Like there are a couple of other places here where I could see the student being like, and those creative solutions have come in really handy when I'm doing such and such thing. So I could see opportunities for weaving in extracurriculars here. Just maybe one or two could be really nice. The other reason, I'll just say this as a side note, that I think this weave in of an extracurricular works is that this student has been through some extraordinary challenges. And this is a lot. When a student goes through a big challenges and then they weave in this free camp for youth, then I think that I'm kind of like my heart goes out to the student and they win. I wouldn't advise the student to cut these things all together personally. I mean, different strokes for different folks. I think if the student started with horses, I worry because there are so many students who write about horses who come from privilege that I might put this student mentally in a box of like, well, oh, raising horses, great. Do you also go sailing? I think I would have my own maybe like bias if the student were to just start with horses. For me, this student talking about these different struggles that they've faced, my heart opens up and I'm just like, wow, they've really been through it. And when they then encounter this horse, it's a different, and this is maybe just my bias, but it's a different situation than if the student were to just be like, I met this horse and, learned a whole bunch of things. I also love Kara's idea where could it be that some of this stuff gets trimmed here, or, I wouldn't want them to cut it all together. And then maybe some of the details get woven in later. I think that could be kind of interesting. But again, I think weaving in the extracurriculars could be nice. I just wanted to like, come back to that because I think there are opportunities for the student to bring in more of themselves. Okay, yeah, Anne's pointing out that, yeah, maybe keeping that first paragraph might not be such a bad thing. I think for storytelling, yeah, I mean, look, if we're making a movie, I think having the student like come up to the horse and like, sniff their hand and like giving them carrots like early in the morning is kind of interesting. But then I think we need to flash back to where the student came from. You know what I mean? So if Bo does come up into the opening, you know, maybe there's like some tranquil opening, and then it's like the transition is like, but it wasn't always this tranquil. Things haven't always been this pastoral and chill. Flashback to 2 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever it was. So I really appreciate, I want to name that I really appreciate the students' vulnerability and willingness to kind of lay this information out there. And there's no sort of like, I don't think there's not that too muchness to it. It's just straightforward, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, Andrea's noting that it's important to note that he moved around so much. Yeah, and that Bo could have provided sort of this anchoring and force. Um, you also go sailing, right? I mean, I don't know. There are certain extracurriculars that we look at and we're just like, sailing. What are some others? You can let me know in the chat. What are some of those others that you kind of go, ooh, they just kind of scream privilege? Traveling, from a young age, I've traveled all over the world. Oh gosh, so okay, let me bend your ear for 2 minutes to tell you about this course that I've got coming up. And it's a 1 day thing. It's 3 hours. Like I said, it's a fundraiser for match lighters. And we're going to get into much more detail on working with students here at the last minute. So let me give you some just quick, like, as it were, there's a really comprehensive workbook that's like, 20 pages. But part one, we're going to talk about how do you assess the essay? So what are some qualities that students can look for and that you can look for with them to figure out, and this is beyond like the great college essay test, what are those qualities that we can help the student look for to be like, is this essay working? Like, is it doing what it should be doing? Could it be doing it better? Or do we need to start over? So I've got like I got like a 3-part thing that you can walk through with students to basically assess an essay in about 10 minutes. Then this is like I think the most valuable part. I've started to work with a couple new exercises that I think are really valuable for helping students come up with topics fast. So this is going to be like and I'm gonna walk y'all through it in like 5-10 minutes, but the whole process takes about 30 minutes. And then we're gonna break up into like small groups where you can basically try this with each other and see if you could come up with an essay topic in about 30 minutes. We're gonna not do it in 30 minutes. We're gonna probably do the 5-minute version. But what are some different sides of yourself that could help you generate? Because I want you to see how it works. And then I'll show you how to do that, with students. I've got a specific thing that I'll share, a template on like a meeting schedule. And then I've got like some agreements that you can set with the student. Because I know that sometimes these are like, there are expectations that come in and we like expect the student to do X, Y, and Z. But just having a simple, hey, sign this, here's what you agree to, here's what I agree to, let's get rolling. It's not going to obviously be a silver bullet to guarantee it, but it starts to build in that accountability, hopefully in ways that will set them up for life. Then I dive in, we'll take a break, and then after that, we're going to dive into the just okay challenges essay. So I've got some different questions that you can ask a student when they're looking when they're written a challenges essay, and you're just like, this ain't it. And then I've got two strategies for helping students improve the challenges essays that just aren't great. And then we're going to talk about improving a just okay extracurricular activity essay. So the ones where you're like, oh my gosh, this is another, let's say if this essay had just focused on horse riding or an essay just focuses on robotics, how do you help students improve those without like tossing out the topic? Then I'm going to go back to cutting words, and I've got something else like a different kind of strategy that can help students. That's especially for students who are a little bit more verbal, and I'll walk through that. And then we'll take another break. And then I'm going to get in with some real student essays, hopefully some from your students, and start to apply some of these principles. And we'll break up into small groups again for a little bit. And then we're going to do a big, ask me anything session. I'm going to talk a little bit about where I think that essays are going in the future, 2025 and beyond. I've been talking to a lot of admission officers on the podcast and in private conversations and share some of the stuff that I've learned there. So I would love for y'all to join if you can. I've got two different times that I'm offering it next week. One is on Thursday and then one is on Saturday. So it's like Thursday night on this time, so like a week from today. And then I've got a session on Saturday. And the sessions are going to be pretty similar in terms of the content, but in terms of the Q&A, obviously they'll be different. But you're welcome to join for both sessions, or you can join for join for the first one and then join for like the last part of the second one, because that'll be different. Um, so that's that. I'd love to just hear, yeah, what questions are popping up for y'all. Mm, it's connected to that one, Sammy. It's a variation on it. I'm so glad it's been helpful. That's really great to hear. Yeah, I'm learning new applications for it. I've got like 5 new applications for this exercise. How do you help students who are feeling burned out or unmotivated? Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but I think some of these things, I think sometimes students aren't sure what the next step is. Um, and I think sometimes doing exercises that break it down for them and show them here's actually the next step to take with this particular essay can be helpful. Now, that may be kind of like, yes, Ethan, I do that, and they still don't write things. Um, I think also chunking it in terms of what is the thing that absolutely needs to get done, I think can be helpful. And like, in other words, just go, like I was saying to the student who was early, who's feeling like maybe overwhelmed, is going, ooh, I don't know if your Zoom, my Zoom background just changed from white to black, night mode. I think chunking it in terms of, all right, what are the things to focus on just this week? Because sometimes I think if they see the 30 essays that they need to write, it can be, yeah, overwhelming. So chunking it and reducing the workload and just going, what in front of the other type stuff. The template that I've got, I think, is helpful for just breaking down. Okay, here's what we're focused on this week, and here are the action items connected to it. What else for motivation? Sometimes just having a deeper conversation with them. And I think sometimes I get focused on the to-dos and like the tasks. And I think there's sometimes, we joke about these, come to Jesus moments, is asking, what's going on? Like, how are you feeling? And it sort of can shift the whole energy and sometimes of an interaction. But if I sense the student is really resisting, I'll just name it and I'll say, hey, and I'll sometimes bring more of myself. So a way that this might sound is like, I'm using nonviolent communication here, by the way. Hey, I noticed, I'm using the observation. I noticed that, in the last 2 weeks, you've had assignments and we've had action items and they didn't get done. I noticed feeling a little bit nervous because I really want you to like do your best work and to be able to like iterate on these. And I'm like a little bit anxious that, it's going to the work's going to build up on you and you're going to have a lot to do at the last minute. And I'm just curious, like how it's going for you all. So I'm kind of bringing in my own vulnerability and sharing my own need. And it's my need for like, I don't know. I guess it's my need for like a certainty that work is going to get done, or like my need for reassurance. I think it's also there's like I'm trying to be transparent with the student, and I think there's sometimes where we sort of check that at the door, or I will say I check that at the door because I'm like I need to be professional and I need to like not share my feelings with my students, even though I'm actually feeling anxious. And I'm not saying overburdening our students, much less like, I wouldn't do this with our kids. Hey, I'm feeling stressed out and it's your fault. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about from this sort of, held place, sharing what's really at stake. And for you, I really want to help you and I really want to support you. And then it can be followed up with the question like, how can I best support you? And then sometimes the student will get, you're engaging them in that creative process and they'll hook into like, I think what I need is like some ideas around getting started. And it's like, great, well, let's talk about what actually needs to get done. And that could point to something. But sometimes the student just needs to make that hook or hook into that, like the actual step that they need. And then sometimes I'll say things like, can you work on this for like 30 minutes? Sometimes in a session that was like scheduled for an hour, I'll be like, hey, we were scheduled for an hour, but we're just 15 minutes in. What if we talk for 15 minutes and then you use the next half hour to get writing? If you can just get them started, that helps too, I find. Okay. Andrea's saying this could be for later in the session. I'm having an essay writing workshop on the SAT for last minute students and our juniors. We're working on the personal statement, but also supplementals if needed. I have 6 students signed up. Any recommendations how you would run an in-person 2-hour workshop for a diverse group of students? I have PowerPoint handouts, etc. I have so much to say about this, Andrea. So for last minute students, and it's a workshop, 2 hours. Okay, I have a whole course on this, which is why I'm hesitating, because I'm like, how do I distill this course into like a minute response for you? If you want, there's pay what you can. It's basically how to lead a life-changing workshop. You're not trying to change lives, you're trying to get some stuff done. So let me distill this. I think that students probably in 2 hours you need to find out where they're at. Do they have drafts or do they not have drafts? I think I would probably have some other folks on deck. Like if you could get 2 more people so that it could be like a 1-to-2 ratio, great. And I would just basically get those folks like working with students one-on-one, and have like sort of jump around because that's probably going to be the best way to get them running. Because at this point, their needs are going to be so diverse that just like you talking and giving them principles is probably going to be less applicable. So I would say get 2 people. And if you can, I'm going to be sharing some stuff in the course on next week. Like share with them these principles and sort of equip them kind of quickly with these tips for like helping last minute kids. But it's going to be the needs are going to be so diverse. It's going to need to be, I think, that one-on-one stuff rather than if we were 6 months ago, or even 3 months ago, it could be sort of like, hey, here's how to brainstorm your personal statement and here's how to outline it. So I would say I would focus on one-on-one work, especially if it's such a small group. If someone were to ask me that same question and it's like 20 students and none of them have started, then I would be like, brainstorm at the personal statement, go to my YouTube channel and type in brainstorming college essay guide and you'll see a great brainstorming exercise there. That's a great one if the student has no ideas. If the student's writing on challenges, you could have them look at the feelings and needs exercise. That's on YouTube. But yeah, I would say get them in with, with one-on-one work with folks. What if a student doesn't feel comfortable sharing an essay with you? I'm a school-based counselor. One of the things you could do, Aaron, is just have them say, that's fine. I guess I feel curious. I'm again using nonviolent communication and I want to be able to support you. How can I do that? How can I support you? Is just the question. And an idea that I have is like, well, would you be willing to like just tell me your essay and you can just leave out any details you want? Just like, and not just like tell me what you wrote about, like the topic, but like just talk me through it and just see if they're comfortable with that. Because then they can kind of edit live on the fly. And as they're telling it to you, essentially they're writing a new draft. And then you can give them feedback on the idea. So for example, you say, can you just tell me your essay? And then notice I'm not saying tell me about your essay, because then that could lead them into like, well, I wrote an essay about these things, but I'm like, well, no, like talk me through it. And I might give an example of like the essay that I just read for y'all. It's like, for example, I experienced challenges early in my life, but then I entered this homeschooling program and it really transformed me. And then a couple of years later, I started volunteering and working with horses, and that really taught me some valuable lessons like healthy boundaries. So that kind of thing, like tell me what you did, sort of paragraph by paragraph if you can. And then what I could do is just give you some feedback. What that'll do is, as the student is relating it to you, you can give them notes and say, I hope that you keep the first part, for example, relatively short in terms of the challenges. because I'd love for you to get into the what you did about it, what you learned later into the essay. Or let's say the student, and I'm guessing oftentimes if the student is nervous to share the essay, oftentimes it's around challenges. So, and if they're totally not willing to do that, I would just give them general advice. And I say, okay, if it's a challenges-based essay, I would say make sure that, and you can do this, you can look at your essay and go, are the challenges and effects, are those in the first third of the essay? In the middle third, maybe you've got some of the what you did about it. And in the final third, what you learned through the experience. I just usually when students are writing about challenges, they talk a lot about the challenges and not as much about what they did and what they learned. So I just want to have you make sure that you've got those in there. And if it's a supplemental essay that they don't want to show you, yeah, I mean, I guess it's a situation where I'm like curious, like how much do I poke? So if it's, let's say it's an essay on, I'm just making this up, but let's say it's an essay on a time when you experience differences from someone. Um, yeah, I think in a situation like that, I might just be curious and say, I'm just curious, like what concerns do you have? If it's private, is it private information? If so, I'm totally fine with it. But there could be something else that they say, and that could lead to new answers. I guess I would just like maybe share my curiosity. If that feels too edgy, too vulnerable to ask the student, why don't you want to share it with me? Then I could see not doing that. I guess in a situation like that, I would just, yeah, ask them how can I support? Because I want to be able to like support you as best I can. I might also ask them, do you have somebody that you could share with that you'd feel comfortable with that could, just be an extra eye? Because I really, yeah, I find it's useful to get outside input. So anyway, that's what I got today on Thursday. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you. And yeah, hope to see some of y'all next week on the course. If not, have a happy, wonderful holiday rest of the year. And we'll be back next year for awesome new stuff. I've got bunches of things that we're working on, some cool stuff on habits, which we'll talk about, and lots more. So much love, and hope to see you soon.